The observation deck of Station Meridian hung in the void between three star systems. It was neutral ground, a place where species who had fought wars against each other could meet without weapons, a place where humanity would show the galaxy what it could do. Ambassador stood at the viewing window and watched the council delegates arrive. Their ships were beautiful in the way that old things are beautiful, sleek designs perfected over thousands of years. The cruiser looked like flowing water frozen in metal. The diplomatic vessel seemed grown rather than built. The massive carrier blocked out stars as it moved into position. Humanity's ship looked like a box with engines attached. Smiled at the comparison. She had learned long ago that appearances meant nothing. The council species had forgotten that lesson. They had ruled the galaxy for so long that they confused age with wisdom and tradition with strength. Today they would evaluate humanity's military capability. It was a requirement for provisional membership. Every new species had to demonstrate what they could do in battle. The council called it a security assessment, called it a test designed to put newcomers in their place. She turned from the window as her military liaison entered the room. Colonel James was a tall man with gray at his temples and calm eyes that had seen too much. He commanded the demonstration team, 12 soldiers from humanity's finest units, Delta Force, Navy SEALs, British SAS, Russian, the best of the best from a dozen nations. "The team is ready," said, "though I still don't understand why we're showing them our special forces. Isn't that giving away our capabilities?" Smile widened. "That's exactly what we're doing, Colonel, trust me." The demonstration chamber was vast. The council had built it to accommodate species of all sizes. The delegate took up one entire section of the viewing gallery. His 4 arms were crossed over his massive chest, and his face showed the boredom of someone watching insects perform tricks. The delegate made notes on a device that floated beside her head. The representative had not moved since taking his seat. His compound eyes reflected the light in ways that made it impossible to tell where he was looking. There were 47 delegates in total, 47 species who had already passed this test, 47 civilizations who would judge whether humanity deserved a seat at the table. Colonel's voice echoed through the chamber. "First demonstration, close quarters breach and clear." The 12 soldiers moved like shadows. They flowed through the mock structure with a precision that came from years of training. Doors were breached in seconds. Rooms were cleared in heartbeats. Simulated enemies fell before they could raise their weapons. The entire exercise took 43 seconds. Watched the delegates. The yawned. The made more notes. A Pelian delegate in the 3rd row leaned over to whisper something to his neighbor. They both made sounds that might have been laughter. Second demonstration, long-range marksmanship. The targets appeared at distances ranging from 500 meters to 2,000 meters. The soldiers hit every one. Center mass, perfect shots, the kind of accuracy that took a lifetime to develop. The delegate finally moved. He raised one appendage in what recognized as a gesture of mild approval. Then he lowered it and returned to stillness. Third demonstration, combat endurance scenario. This was the impressive one. The soldiers faced a simulation designed to push any species to its limits. 12 hours of continuous engagement, shifting terrain, environmental hazards, enemies that adapted to their tactics. The soldiers fought through all of it. They took simulated wounds that would have killed members of most species. They kept fighting. When the scenario ended, all 12 were still standing. The chamber fell silent. Then the delegate spoke. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "These are your elite soldiers, your finest warriors." Stepped forward. "Yes, honored delegate, these are members of what we call special forces, our most highly trained military personnel." The made a sound deep in his chest. "They are adequate, comparable to our standard planetary garrison units, perhaps slightly below average for the defensive corps." The delegate inclined her head. "A fair assessment. Their endurance is notable, but their reaction times are slow. Their strength is limited. Their natural weapons are practically non-existent. She paused. They would serve well as support troops in a mixed-species engagement. Kept her face neutral. I appreciate the evaluation. The finally spoke. His voice was dry and clicking. The Council will note that humanity's military elite demonstrate competence without excellence. Provisional membership may proceed with standard restrictions. Humanity will be classified as a minor military power, Category 7. The delegates began to file out. Some nodded politely to as they passed. Others ignored her entirely. The delegate stopped beside her, his massive form blocking out the light. Do not be discouraged, human. Many young species struggle with combat. In a few thousand years, you may develop warriors worthy of respect. He walked away before she could respond. Colonel appeared at her side. His jaw was tight with controlled anger. They think we're weak. They think that was our best. Yes, said, they do. Ambassador, I have soldiers who could have performed twice as well. We held back on purpose. Why? Turned to face him. Her smile was gone now. In its place was something cold and calculating, something that reminded why this woman had been chosen to represent humanity to the galaxy. Colonel, what happens when you show someone your full strength? He thought about it. They prepare for it, they build defenses, they find countermeasures. Exactly, but what happens when you show them something lesser, something they can dismiss? Understanding dawned in his eyes. They underestimate you. The Council has ruled this galaxy for 50,000 years, said. They have seen 100 species rise and fall. They think they know everything about war. They think they can measure a civilization's strength by watching 12 soldiers perform exercises. She turned back to the window. The delegate ships were departing. Running lights blinked in the darkness like dying stars. They evaluated our special forces and found them adequate. They will file their report and forget about us. They will treat humanity as a minor power to be ignored or patronized. Her voice dropped. They will never think to ask about our regular soldiers, the ones who aren't special, the millions who serve without glory or recognition. Colonel stood beside her in silence. He thought about the men and women he had commanded over the years, the infantry soldiers who marched through mud and blood, the Marines who held positions until death, the ordinary warriors who did extraordinary things because someone had to. They're going to regret this evaluation, he said quietly. Nodded, yes, Colonel, they are. I just hope it doesn't take a war to teach them that lesson. The station's lights dimmed as the last delegate ship jumped to faster-than-light travel. Humanity had been measured and found wanting. The Council had made its judgment. Smiled again. It was not a pleasant smile. The Council had made a mistake, and somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, the future was already moving toward a reckoning that would shake their ancient civilization to its core. 3 years passed like water through open fingers. Humanity settled into its role as a minor member of the Galactic Council. They traded. They built. They kept their heads down and learned everything they could about their new neighbors. And then the came. The hegemony was not part of the Council. They had refused membership 1,000 years ago, choosing conquest over cooperation. They were predators in every sense of the word, 6-limbed creatures with armored hides and claws that could tear through starship hulls. They had conquered 17 species and enslaved billions. The Council had fought them to a standstill decades ago, but the peace was fragile. Everyone knew it was only a matter of time. The attack came without warning. 5 battle fleets dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Council space. They hit 3 systems simultaneously. Defense stations burned. Colony worlds fell silent. By the time the Council realized what was happening, they had already pushed deep into the border territories. Admiral Coordinator received the reports in her command center on the. She was old for her species. Her silver scales faded to gray. She had fought the 50 years ago. She knew what they were capable of. Spread our fleets to cover the major population centers, she ordered. We cannot stop them everywhere, but we can protect the critical worlds. Her aide, a young named, pulled up the tactical display. Red icons marked positions. Blue icons marked council forces. There was far more red than blue. Admiral said, "There is a human colony in the path of the Third Fleet. New Helsinki, 20,000 civilians." Looked at the display. New Helsinki was a small world on the very edge of human territory. It had minimal defenses, a few orbital platforms, a handful of ground-based weapons, nothing that could stop a landing force. How many are heading for that system? 15,000 ground troops, 12 warships, estimated arrival in 18 hours. Closed her eyes. She had seen colonies fall before. She knew the mathematics of war. There was no way to save New Helsinki. The nearest council fleet was 6 days away. By the time they arrived, they would have already finished their work. "Prepare evacuation protocols," she said quietly. "Perhaps we can save some of them." Admiral's voice was strange. "There is a human ship in the system, a military transport. They are changing course toward New Helsinki." Opened her eyes. What kind of military transport? Consulted his display. Infantry carrier, 400 soldiers. They were returning from a training exercise when the attack began. What unit? Let me check. Compound eyes flickered as he processed the information. The 3rd Battalion, 7th Infantry Regiment, United Nations Colonial Defense Force. Felt something cold settle in her chest. Not special forces. No, Admiral, regular infantry, standard training, standard equipment. 400 regular soldiers against 15,000 veterans. The mathematics were not just unfavorable, they were impossible. Those humans were flying toward their deaths. "Open a channel to that transport," ordered. The communication link crackled to life. A human face appeared on the screen. He was middle-aged with dark skin and tired eyes. His uniform was plain and worn. The name on his chest read, "This is Lieutenant Colonel commanding 3rd Battalion. Go ahead, Admiral." Chose her words carefully. "Colonel, you are aware of the force approaching New Helsinki?" "Yes, ma'am. We picked up the distress call an hour ago." "You understand that you cannot defeat them. Your force is outnumbered nearly 40 to 1. They are the most dangerous ground combatants in the known galaxy." His expression did not change. "I understand the situation, Admiral." "Then why are you continuing toward the colony? You should retreat to the nearest council stronghold. Your lives have value. Do not throw them away on a hopeless cause." There was silence on the channel. Looked at something off-screen. Could hear voices in the background. Human voices speaking quickly in languages she did not recognize. When turned back, his eyes were different, harder. "Admiral, there are 20,000 civilians on that world, families, children. They don't take prisoners from colonies, they take trophies. I know what to do. That is why you should save yourselves while you can." "With respect, Admiral, that's not how this works." Leaned forward slightly. "Those are human civilians, our people. We don't leave our people behind." "You will die." "Maybe, probably," shrugged. "But we'll make the pay for every meter of ground. We'll buy time for evacuation ships. We'll give those families a chance." Stared at the human on her screen. She had commanded soldiers for 60 years. She had sent thousands to their deaths. She understood duty and sacrifice and the cold equations of war. But she had never seen anything quite like what she saw in his eyes. "Colonel, your soldiers are not special forces. They are regular infantry. What makes you think you can hold against the even for a day?" Smiled. It was a strange smile, sad and proud at the same time. "Admiral, you keep saying they're not special forces like that's supposed to mean something. Like regular soldiers are somehow less." He shook his head. "Ma'am, I've got 400 men and women who signed up knowing they might die for strangers they'll never meet. They trained for years to be ready for moments exactly like this. They're not special forces. They're better. They're the ones who do the job when there's no glory and no recognition and no hope of survival. The channel went silent for a moment. We're 12 hours out from New Helsinki, continued. We'll be on the ground before they arrive. If your relief fleet can get there in 6 days, that's how long we'll hold. That is impossible. Then we'll hold for 7. The channel closed. Sat in her command chair and stared at the tactical display. The human transport was a small blue dot moving toward a world that would soon turn red. 400 soldiers against 15,000 killers. She thought about the military assessment she had read 3 years ago, the one that classified humanity as a minor military power, the one that dismissed their special forces as adequate and their civilization as insignificant. For the first time in 50 years, Admiral Coordinator began to wonder if the Council had made a terrible mistake. She turned to her aide. I want continuous monitoring of the New Helsinki situation. Every report, every transmission, everything. Yes, Admiral, you expect them to survive. Looked at the display one more time. The blue dot was still moving forward, still heading towards certain death, still refusing to run. I don't know what to expect, she said quietly, but I think we're about to learn something important about humanity, something we should have learned a long time ago. The stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. The fleet moved closer, and 400 ordinary soldiers prepared to make a stand that the galaxy would never forget. The transport touched down on New Helsinki's main landing pad with 11 hours to spare. Lieutenant Colonel was the first one off the ramp. The air smelled like pine trees and fear. Colony Administrator was waiting for him. She was a small woman with gray hair and the look of someone who had already accepted death. Behind her, the colonial capital stretched out in neat rows of prefabricated buildings. 20,000 people lived here, farmers, engineers, teachers, children. Colonel said, I don't know whether to thank you or curse you, you should have run. Looked past her at the mountains that ringed the colony. Good defensive terrain, natural. He had studied the maps during the flight down. His mind was already calculating fields of fire and fallback positions. How many people can you evacuate before they arrive? His face tightened. We have 3 civilian transports, maybe 2,000 people. The lottery is already. Keep loading. Every life we save matters. Turned to his executive officer, Major Sarah Reeves. Get the battalion moving. We have 11 hours to turn this place into a fortress. What happened next would become legend. 400 soldiers worked without rest. They dug trenches with borrowed farming equipment. They fortified buildings with whatever materials they could find. They set up overlapping fields of fire that covered every approach to the colony. They placed sensors and tripwires and improvised explosive devices along every path they might take. The civilians helped. They brought food and water. They moved supplies. An old man who had been an engineer before retirement helped redesign the defensive network. A teenage girl who was supposed to be on the evacuation list refused to leave and spent hours hauling ammunition. 11 hours passed like 11 minutes. They arrived with the dawn. Their landing ships blackened the sky like a plague of metal locusts. They touched down 5 kilometers from the colony, in the open fields where colonists had planned to grow crops next season. 15,000 warriors poured out of those ships. Their armored hides gleamed in the morning light. Their battle cries echoed off the mountains like thunder. Watched them through his binoculars from the forward command post. He had fought aliens before. Border skirmishes, peacekeeping operations. Nothing like this. They're forming up for a direct assault, Major Reeves said. No subtlety. They expect to walk right over us. Then let's show them different, keyed his radio. All units weapons free, make them earn every step. The charged. They moved fast for creatures their size. Their legs ate up the ground in great bounding strides. They expected to reach the colony in minutes. They expected to find frightened civilians and token resistance. They expected victory. The first line of explosives detonated when they were 2 kilometers out. The blast tore through their forward ranks. Bodies flew through the air. The charge faltered, then resumed. The second line hit them at 1 kilometer. More explosions, more death. The commanders screamed orders. Their warriors spread out, trying to avoid the kill zones. It didn't help. The humans had planned for that too. At 500 meters, the rifles opened up. 400 soldiers firing from prepared positions. Every shot aimed. Every bullet placed with precision born from years of training on ranges where ammunition was expensive and misses were failures. They had never faced anything like it. They were used to enemies who panicked and scattered, enemies who fought briefly and then died. These humans did not panic. They did not scatter. They fired and reloaded and fired again with mechanical efficiency. The first assault broke against the outer defenses like a wave against rocks. 800 bodies lay in the killing fields. The survivors pulled back to regroup. Allowed himself a small moment of satisfaction. Then he checked his ammunition counts and felt it fade. "They'll come again," Reeves said. "I know, and we don't have enough bullets for the next 50 charges." The second assault came 2 hours later. They had learned from their mistakes. They came in waves, keeping spread out, using their fallen comrades for cover. They pushed through the outer defenses by sheer numbers. They reached the first line of trenches. That was where they learned about human close combat. The fighting in those trenches was brutal beyond description. Claws against human bayonets. Alien strength against human stubbornness. The trenches filled with blood from both species. Soldiers died with their hands around enemy throats. They died still fighting, still refusing to give ground. When the second assault finally broke, 600 more were dead. So were 73 humans. The outer trenches were lost, but the main defensive line held. Day turned to night. Night turned to day. They kept coming. They tried flanking attacks through the mountains. Human snipers picked them off in the narrow passes. They tried night assaults using their superior dark vision. Human thermal sensors and flares turned night into day. They tried burrowing under the defenses. Human engineers collapsed their tunnels and buried them alive. By the third day, the commander was receiving reports that made no sense. His warriors had faced countless species. They had conquered worlds where the defenders had better weapons, better numbers, better everything. Those defenders had always broken eventually. Fear was universal. Self-preservation was universal. But these humans did not seem to understand either concept. They fought with wounds that should have killed them. Soldiers with missing limbs continued firing from their positions. Soldiers who should have bled to death kept fighting until their hearts actually stopped. When positions fell, the survivors immediately counterattacked. When ammunition ran low, they used knives and clubs in their bare hands. The commander requested reinforcement. He was told none were available. He requested permission to withdraw. He was told the hegemony did not retreat. On the fourth day, he led the assault personally. He was the largest on the planet, a veteran of 30 campaigns. He had killed thousands with his own claws. He charged into the human lines with 5,000 warriors at his back. It would be the final push. The humans were wounded and exhausted and running out of everything. He made it to the inner defensive ring. He killed 7 humans with his own claws. He was raising his arm to kill an 8th when something hit him in the chest. He looked down. A human female was standing in front of him. She was wounded in 3 places. Her left arm hung useless at her side. Her right hand held a knife buried to the hilt in his chest, right where his secondary heart should be. "You're still standing," she said, almost conversationally. "That's impressive." He tried to speak, his mouth filled with blood instead of words. "My friends aren't," she continued. "Sergeant, Private, Corporal Williams. They're not standing anymore because of you." She twisted the knife. "But you know what? They held their positions, every single one of them. They did their jobs until they couldn't anymore." Her eyes were bright with something that might have been tears or might have been rage. "That's what soldiers do, regular soldiers, the ones nobody writes songs about." The commander fell. The largest, most decorated warrior in the landing force died with a human knife in his heart and human words in his ears. The fifth assault broke, the sixth, the seventh. By the sixth day they had lost over 11,000 warriors. The humans had lost 240. The colony still stood. The civilians still lived. Admiral's relief fleet was 1 day away. In his command post, surrounded by the wounded and the dying, Lieutenant Colonel looked at his remaining soldiers. 160 men and women, exhausted beyond description, hurt in ways that would never fully heal. But still standing, still ready, still refusing to give up. "One more day," he told them, "just one more day." They nodded, they checked their weapons, they returned to their positions. Outside, the surviving looked at the human defenses and felt something they had never felt before. Fear. Admiral Coordinator stood on the bridge of her flagship as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The new Helsinki system spread out before her. Sensors immediately began feeding her information. She expected to find a graveyard, a burned colony, human bodies scattered across charred ground, perhaps a few survivors hiding in the mountains, waiting for rescue that had come too late. Instead, she found the impossible. The fleet was in full retreat. 12 warships that had arrived with 15,000 warriors were fleeing toward the system's edge. Their engines burned at maximum power. They were not fighting. They were not regrouping. They were running. "Admiral," her sensor officer said, his voice strange with disbelief, "the colony is intact. I'm reading 20,000 civilian life signs. And," he paused, checking his instruments twice, "I'm reading 160 human military life signs on the surface." 160 out of 400. Sat down slowly. Her scales had gone pale, which meant she was experiencing an emotion she rarely felt: shock. "What about the ground forces?" The sensor officer's voice dropped. "I'm detecting approximately 4,000 life signs retreating toward their landing zone. The rest are," he swallowed, "the rest are dead, Admiral. Over 11,000 casualties." The bridge went silent. Every officer stopped what they were doing. Numbers like that did not happen. They were the most feared ground fighters in the galaxy. They had conquered civilizations with armies 10 times the size of what they had brought to New Helsinki. And they had been broken by 400 regular human soldiers. "Launch medical shuttles," ordered. "I want rescue teams on the ground immediately, and open a channel to the human commander." The communication screen flickered to life. The face that appeared was barely recognizable as human. Lieutenant Colonel was covered in dirt and dried blood. His eyes were sunken with exhaustion. A bandage wrapped around his head had turned brown with old wounds. He looked like a corpse that had forgotten to stop moving. But he was standing, and when he saw, he actually smiled. "Admiral, good timing. We were starting to run low on coffee." Stared at him. "Colonel, you're alive." "Most of me." He glanced at something off-screen. "My battalion held the line. The civilians are safe. They are done." He paused. "We lost a lot of good people getting here. I'd like to make sure we don't lose any more." "Medical teams are already on their way." Leaned forward. "Colonel, I need to understand what happened here. My tactical staff is telling me that what you accomplished is impossible. The numbers don't work. The mathematics don't work. How did you do this?" Was quiet for a long moment. Behind him, could see movement. Wounded soldiers being carried to treatment areas. Men and women who should have died days ago still working to help their comrades. "Admiral, I'm not sure I can explain it in a way that makes sense to you. It's just what we do." "What you do?" You held against 40-1 odds. You broke an assault force that could have conquered a dozen worlds. Your casualties are unprecedented. Their casualties are unprecedented. We had good defensive terrain, we had time to prepare, and we had something to fight for. Shook her head. I have studied war for 60 years. I have seen every species in the Council fight and die. What you did here is not just difficult, it should be physically impossible. Your soldiers are not enhanced. They don't have superior weapons or technology. They're just, she struggled for the word, regular. His expression changed. Something hard came into his eyes, something that made suddenly very aware that she was speaking to a predator. Regular, he repeated. Yeah, that's what we are, regular soldiers, the ones who don't get special training or special equipment or special recognition, the ones who just show up and do the job. He took a step closer to the camera. Admiral, you know what makes a regular soldier. It's not genetic engineering or cybernetic enhancement or any of that. It's a choice. A choice to stand when running would be easier. A choice to fight when surrender would be safer. A choice to die for people they've never met because someone has to. He gestured behind him. Those men and women out there. They're farmers' kids and factory workers and college students who decided to put on a uniform. They don't have claws or armor or any of the advantages they have. They just have training and discipline and a stubborn refusal to quit. And that was enough to defeat the. That's always been enough. His voice was quiet now. The Council evaluated our special forces 3 years ago. You watched them perform exercises and run simulations, and you decided we were a minor military power. Adequate, unremarkable. Remembered that assessment. She had signed off on it herself. You never asked about the regular soldiers, the infantry, the Marines, the men and women who do the real fighting. Shook his head. You saw our best performers and assumed they represented our peak capability. You never considered that our average might be just as dangerous. How many regular soldiers does humanity have? The question came out before could stop it. She wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Thought about it. Active duty, about 8 million. Reserves, another 20 million. And if things get really bad, we can mobilize a lot more. How many more? Admiral, humanity fought 2 world wars before we ever left our planet. In the second one, we mobilized over 100 million soldiers. That was 80 years ago, with a fraction of our current population. The number hung in the air between them. We're not special, continued. That's what I'm trying to tell you. What my battalion did here, any human unit could have done. Any company, any platoon, any squad. Put humans in a defensive position, give them something to protect, and they will hold until they die. And then their replacements will hold, and their replacements, for as long as it takes. Sat back in her chair. Her mind was racing through calculations she had never considered before. The military balance of the galaxy, the assumptions that had guided Council strategy for thousands of years, all of it suddenly seemed fragile, incomplete. Colonel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Go ahead. Your special forces, the ones we evaluated, how do they compare to your regular soldiers? Smiled again, but this time there was no warmth in it. Admiral, our special forces are the ones we send when we need precision, surgical strikes, covert operations. They're the scalpel. He paused. The regular forces are the hammer, and behind the hammer there's a whole lot more waiting to be called up. And if someone threatened humanity directly, endangered your species, then you'd see what humans look like when we're really fighting, when we're not holding back, when we're not trying to be good members of the galactic community. Eyes were cold now. Admiral, everything you've seen here, the impossible defense, the refusal to surrender, the willingness to die for strangers. He leaned close to the screen. This is us being restrained. This is us fighting by the rules. You don't want to see what happens when we stop. The channel closed. Admiral Coordinator sat alone on her bridge, surrounded by officers who had heard everything. No one spoke, no one moved. She thought about the report she would have to write, the one that would go to the full council, the one that would explain how 400 regular human soldiers had broken an invasion force. She thought about what it would mean for the galaxy. And for the first time in her long career, Admiral Coordinator was afraid of an ally. The council chamber had not been this full in centuries. Every delegate from every member species was present. The circular room hummed with whispered conversations in 100 different languages. Holographic displays showed the same images on repeat. The colony of New Helsinki, the landing force, the defensive positions held by 400 humans against impossible odds. And the final casualty, counts that no one could quite believe. High Counselor, the eldest of the and leader of the assembly, called the chamber to order. The whispers died away. Every eye, every sensor, every attention-focusing organ turned toward the central platform. "We are gathered to discuss the incident at New Helsinki," began, and more specifically, to discuss the implications for Council security policy regarding humanity. The delegate shifted in his massive seat. The implications are clear. Humanity is more dangerous than our assessments indicated. We should take steps to limit their influence before they become a threat. "They broke the delegate replied. His dry voice carried through the chamber. 400 soldiers against 15,000. If humanity wished to be a threat, they already would be. Which makes them even more dangerous. A species that powerful and that restrained. They're planning something." Admiral Coordinator rose from her seat. The chamber fell silent. She was a war hero, a respected strategist, and the one who had witnessed the aftermath at New Helsinki firsthand. "Honored delegates," she said, "I have prepared a full military assessment of humanity based on new intelligence gathered after the incident. I believe you need to hear this before making any decisions." Nodded, "Proceed, Admiral." Activated her data display. Charts and numbers appeared in the air above the central platform. 3 years ago, we evaluated humanity's special forces and classified them as a minor military power, Category 7. Based on that assessment, we assumed their total military capability was minimal, comparable to a mid-level planetary defense force. She changed the display. "We were wrong, catastrophically wrong." The new numbers appeared. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The delegate actually stood up, his 4 arms spread in disbelief. "Humanity maintains approximately 8 million active-duty soldiers, 20 million in reserve status. Their planetary defense networks include over 12,000 combat installations. Their fleet, while small by Council standards, is designed entirely for aggressive action rather than territorial defense." These numbers are asked, and possibly understated. Humanity does not share complete military data with the Council. These figures are based on intelligence gathering and analysis. The Pelian delegate raised a manipulator arm. "Admiral, these numbers are concerning but not unprecedented. They have larger forces. The Empire maintains more installations. Why does this warrant such alarm?" Paused. This was the part that had kept her awake for days. "Because these are their peacetime numbers. Humanity has something they call conscription protocols. In the event of an existential threat, they can mobilize their entire adult population for military service." She let that sink in. Humanity's total population is approximately 15 billion. Assuming standard military age percentages and accounting for essential civilian functions, their theoretical maximum mobilization is over 5 billion soldiers. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in languages the translation system struggled to process. The delegate was making sounds that might have been laughter or might have been screaming. The representative had gone completely still, his compound eyes reflecting the impossible numbers on the display. 5 billion, someone said. "That's more than the combined military forces of the entire council. And every single one of them," continued, "is trained to the standard that held New Helsinki." Silence fell like a hammer. I spoke with the human commander after the battle, Lieutenant Colonel. He told me something that I haven't been able to forget. His voice was quiet now. He said that what happened at New Helsinki is not exceptional for humanity. Any human unit given the same circumstances would have performed the same way. The willingness to die for strangers, the refusal to surrender, the capacity to endure far beyond physical limits. These are not rare traits among humans. They are baseline. High Counselor leaned forward. "Admiral, what do you recommend?" "I recommend that we reclassify humanity immediately, not as a minor military power, but as a strategic-level threat, the highest classification we have." The delegates' laughter cut through the chamber. "A threat? They've been nothing but cooperative since they joined the council. They helped us against the... Why would we treat them as enemies?" "Because they could be, and we would have no way to stop them." Turn to face the full assembly. "Delegates, I have run projections, war games, simulations. In every scenario where humanity commits their full military capability against the council, we lose. Not eventually, not after a prolonged conflict. We lose quickly and completely." "Then we should strike first," the delegate growled, "before they realize their advantage. And condemn billions to death in a war we cannot win." The representative finally moved, his ancient body unfolding from his seat. "Admiral, surely there is another option." Nodded slowly. "There is. We can choose not to see humanity as a threat. We can recognize them for what they actually are." "And what is that?" "An ally, perhaps the most valuable ally this council has ever had." She changed the display again. "Look at what happened at New Helsinki. Humanity did not have to defend that colony. They could have retreated and saved their own soldiers. Instead, they chose to fight for civilians they had never met. They chose to die for people who were not even members of their own species." The chamber was quiet now, listening. Humanity does not seek conquest. They do not want to rule the galaxy. They want what every species wants: safety, prosperity, a future for their children. His voice rose. "And they are willing to fight for those things, not just for themselves, but for anyone they consider a friend." She looked around the chamber at the assembled delegates. Some were afraid, some were angry, some were simply confused. "The question before this council is not whether humanity is dangerous. They are. The question is what we do with that knowledge. We can treat them as a threat and guarantee that they become one. Or we can treat them as partners and gain the most loyal, most determined, most capable ally the galaxy has ever seen." High Counselor was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke. "There will be a vote. All delegates will have one cycle to consider the Admiral's words." The session ended. Delegates filed out in small groups, still arguing, still debating. But the tone had changed. The fear was still there, but something else had joined it. Respect. 3 days later, the vote was held. Humanity was reclassified not as a threat, but as a strategic partner, the highest status the Council could offer. The news spread across the galaxy. On 1,000 worlds, military commanders quietly updated their threat assessments. They added notes about human endurance and human stubbornness and human refusal to surrender. They studied the Battle of New Helsinki and tried to understand how 400 soldiers had changed everything. On Earth, Ambassador received the news with a smile that her staff found slightly unsettling. "They finally figured it out," she said. Her aide looked confused. "Figured what out, Ambassador?" "That our special forces are the ones we send when we want to be subtle." Her smile widened. "The regular soldiers are the ones we send when we want to win." And far away, on a hospital ship orbiting New Helsinki, Lieutenant Colonel sat beside the beds of his wounded soldiers. 160 had survived. 240 had not. He knew every name, every face, every story. They had held the line, not because they were special, not because they had advantages or enhancements or anything that set them apart. They had held because that's what soldiers do, regular soldiers, the ones who do the job when no one else will. The galaxy had finally learned to fear humanity, but more importantly, they had learned to respect them, not for their weapons or their numbers or their technology, for their choice. The choice to stand when running would be easier, the choice to fight when surrender would be safer, the choice to die for strangers because someone has to. Looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, new threats were gathering, new battles were waiting, and when they came, there would be regular soldiers ready to meet them. Not special, just human. And that had always been enough.